The first thing that hit me wasn't fear. It was confusion. The kind that makes your brain hesitate for half a second, just long enough for something terrible to slip in. 8 years have passed since that night in the upper Idaho wilderness, and I still replay it in my head. Every word, every glance into the dark, every second where I felt like something invisible had stepped just a little too close. I was in my early 20s back then. Not an expert camper, but not reckless either. I hiked often, knew how to set camp, manage food, keep my fire controlled, and stay alert in bear country. Upper Idaho wasn't forgiving. Black bears, grizzlies, long empty stretches with no cell signal and almost no people. Most casual hikers avoided the area entirely. That's exactly why I liked it. I deliberately stayed away from tourist trails and popular campgrounds. I preferred lesser-known paths where the silence felt real, not staged. For this trip, I picked a quiet trail just outside the main mountain range. Nothing dramatic, just forested hills leading to an open clearing with a view of the peaks in the distance. The nearest official trailhead was about 3 miles away near a small lake. I avoided it on purpose, assuming that's where any other campers would be. I was right. The entire hike in, I didn't see a single person. The trail looked barely used, grass reclaiming the edges. When I finally reached the clearing, it was wide open and completely empty. Perfect. I pitched my tent on the far side of the clearing, stacked heavy stones into a makeshift fire pit, and checked the sky. I still had a few hours of daylight left. No rush, no plans, just quiet. As evening settled in, I lit the fire, roasted marshmallows, and leaned back to watch the stars slowly emerge. The valley was peaceful, a light breeze through the trees, distant wildlife calls echoing faintly through the hills. Then the silence broke. A crunch. Another crunch. Leaves being stepped on, slow and deliberate. Not an animal, a person. I froze, staring into the dark tree line, trying to pinpoint the sound. My mind raced through possibilities. Another camper? Someone lost? A late hiker? A shadow emerged at the edge of the firelight. A man stood there. The flickering flames distorted his outline, making his face impossible to read. I could see the shape of a hiking backpack strapped to his shoulders. Standard camping gear. Nothing obviously threatening. He scanned my campsite quietly. Then he looked directly at me. Before I could say a word, he whispered, "Sorry," barely louder than breath. Then he turned around and walked back into the darkness, exactly the direction he'd come from. I sat there stunned. Sorry for what? If he was searching for a campsite, why apologize like he'd been caught doing something wrong? And why whisper? The whole interaction felt wrong. Not dangerous exactly, just unsettling in a way I couldn't quite define. Still, after a few minutes, the woods returned to silence and my nerves slowly settled. I went back to watching the stars. Hours passed. Clouds began drifting across the sky, slowly swallowing the moon and plunging the forest into heavier darkness. I wasn't tired yet, so I stayed by the fire, feeding the flames and letting the quiet stretch on. Then I heard footsteps again. This time, they were fast, panicked, branches snapping, leaves tearing under hurried movement, coming from the same direction as before. My stomach tightened as I stood up. The man burst into the edge of the firelight. It was definitely him. Same backpack, same build, but now I could see him clearly. His beard was scruffy and uneven. Dark hair clung to his forehead, greasy with sweat. Dirt streaked his face and smeared his clothes like he'd fallen or crawled through brush. His breathing was shallow and sharp. His eyes were wide, not alert, terrified, yet his mouth remained stiff and emotionless, like his face hadn't caught up with his panic yet. "You okay?" I asked cautiously. "You should have reached your campsite by now. It's getting late." He didn't answer right away. He stood there catching his breath, scanning the area, but not randomly. His eyes kept darting over my right shoulder, just for a split second, then snapping back to my face, Again and again. "Are you lost?" I offered. "Maybe I can help. I've got a radio if you need." He cut me off quietly. "No," he muttered. "Just hiking. Didn't mean to bother you." But his eyes never stopped moving. They kept flicking past me, always to the same spot behind my shoulder. My skin began to crawl. "You look nervous," I said carefully. "If something's wrong, you can stay here for a bit." This time he ignored me completely. His gaze suddenly locked onto me with unsettling intensity. "You're camping here," he said slowly. "Yes. Why?" The way he asked made my throat tighten. His eyes darted behind me again. Against my better judgment, I turned my head. Nothing. Only dark trees, empty woods, firelight fading into shadows. When I looked back at him, his expression had shifted. "Is it just you here?" he asked. "Are you alone? Where are the others?" My heartbeat spiked. There aren't any others," I started to say. He interrupted sharply. "Have you been following me?" "What? No." His posture stiffened. Then his eyes moved again, but this time, they didn't come back to me. His gaze locked onto something behind my shoulder, wide, hollow, frozen in terror. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Then why are you with her?" The words hit me like ice water. With her? Every nerve in my body screamed as I spun around, sweeping the firelight across the trees behind me. Nothing. Just darkness layered over darkness. Tall trunks dissolving into shadow. No movement, no sound. I turned back to him. His face had completely changed. The color drained from his skin. His mouth hung slightly open. His pupils were stretched wide, locked onto something I couldn't see. Something that seemed to exist only for him. Fear like that doesn't look human. It looks raw, animal, broken. Without warning, he stumbled backward. Then he turned and ran. Not toward the trail, not toward any recognizable path. He bolted straight into the thick forest, crashing through branches and disappearing beyond the reach of my firelight in seconds. I stood there frozen, heart hammering so violently I could feel it in my throat. The clearing felt wrong now. Too open, too exposed. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone standing just beyond the edge of the light, a silhouette watching silently from the trees. Nothing moved, but the feeling didn't leave. My mind spiraled. Was he hallucinating, starving, dehydrated, lost for days? Or had he truly been running from something that now knew exactly where I was? I didn't wait to find out. I kicked dirt over the fire, grabbed whatever I could carry, and stuffed it into my pack with shaking hands. My fingers felt numb. Every small sound made me flinch. Leaves shifted. I jumped. Wind brushed the branches. I froze. My imagination kept painting shapes between the trees. I slung my pack over my shoulders and started toward the trail, keeping the lantern raised high. Even though the man had run the opposite direction, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every shadow felt too deep. Every gap between trees felt like an open doorway for something unseen. The walk felt endless. My boots crunched too loudly against gravel and leaves. My breathing sounded unnatural in the quiet night. I kept scanning behind me, expecting to see movement pacing just outside the lantern's glow. At one point, I swore I heard a soft step behind me. I spun around. Nothing, just black forest swallowing light. I forced myself forward. My heart didn't slow until I finally saw the faint outline of my car through the trees. Relief crashed over me so hard my legs almost gave out. I unlocked the door, threw myself inside, and locked everything immediately. The engine roared to life far louder than I expected. Headlights cut across the woods, but I refused to scan the tree line. Some instincts don't need logic. I pulled away fast. I didn't stop driving until the darkness of the forest faded behind me and the first distant lights of town appeared. Even then, my hands were shaking. The next morning, after some sleep and a lot of pacing, I contacted the local police station and reported the encounter. Not because I thought a crime had happened, but because something about that man's condition bothered me deeply. He hadn't looked dangerous. He had looked desperate. Over the years, after talking to hikers, rangers, and people familiar with survival psychology, one explanation kept coming up again and again. Extreme exposure, severe dehydration, hunger, sleep deprivation. When the human body is pushed far enough, the mind can fracture. Paranoia sets in. Hallucinations feel real. Shadows become threats. Imaginary pursuers feel tangible. It's possible he'd been lost for days, maybe longer, slowly losing his grip on reality. By the time he found me, his brain may have already been locked into survival panic. Maybe he truly believed someone was following him. Maybe when he saw me alone in the woods, he couldn't trust whether I was real help or part of whatever he thought was hunting him. If that's true, then his fear might have saved my life. Because if there really was someone else out there, someone actually stalking him, his warning forced me to leave before I ever found out. The unsettling part? No missing hiker matching his description was ever officially reported in that area. No confirmed sightings, no trace. Which means either he somehow made it out on his own, or the forest kept him. Either way, I never went back to that trail again. Some warnings don't come with proof, only instincts. And sometimes, that's enough. Next story. I didn't realize someone had been inside my house for over an hour. Not when the cold air crept across the floor. Not when the window was open. Not even when I heard the thump behind the wall. I realized it only when I opened my closet and found myself staring straight into a stranger's face, only inches away, hidden behind my clothes, waiting. That night, I had planned to pull an all-nighter. I had procrastinated way too long on a stack of work papers that absolutely had to be finished by morning. A couple of deadlines collided at once, and I didn't really have a choice anymore. Either stay up and grind through it, or face the consequences later. So around late evening, I brewed a strong cup of coffee, headed upstairs to my small home office, shut the door behind me, and locked myself in. No distractions, no excuses, just work. For the first few hours, it actually went surprisingly well. I stayed focused, sipped my coffee, powered through page after page. The house was quiet and still, the kind of silence you only really notice late at night. But eventually, the caffeine wore off. My mug was empty. My eyes started to burn. My shoulders felt stiff from sitting too long. My thoughts began drifting in slow, unfocused loops. I figured a short break might reset my brain. So I stood up, stretched, and walked downstairs to make another cup of coffee. That's when I noticed the cold. The temperature downstairs felt noticeably different than the rest of the house, like a chill had settled into the air. It wasn't dramatic, but it was enough that my skin prickled slightly as I walked across the kitchen floor, almost like a draft. I checked the thermostat. The heat was on, but the temperature was several degrees lower than what I usually kept it at. That didn't make sense. I hadn't touched it. So I started walking through the living room, trying to figure out where the cold air was coming from. That's when I saw it. One of the back windows was wide open. Not cracked, not slightly ajar. Wide open. I froze for a second, staring at it. I did sometimes open the downstairs windows during the day for fresh air, but I was almost certain I always closed them before night. And even if I had forgotten once or twice before, I never left one open that wide. A slow, uneasy thought crept into my mind. What if someone opened it? I approached the window carefully, heart beating just a little faster than it should have been. I leaned forward and looked outside, scanning the ground beneath it for footprints, scuff marks, anything that might suggest someone had climbed in. There was nothing. No disturbed dirt. No footprints. No smudges or marks on the frame. Nothing that proved someone had been there. And in moments like that, your brain does what it always does. It tries to calm you down. You start telling yourself you're overthinking. That weird things don't just happen to you. that you probably just forgot to close the window properly. So that's what I convinced myself of. I closed the window, locked it, grabbed my fresh cup of coffee, and went back upstairs. But the unease didn't completely go away. For the next 30 minutes, I kept catching myself glancing toward the door, replaying the window in my head. The logic made sense, but something about it still bothered me. Eventually, I gave in and did a quick sweep of the house. I checked the rooms, the doors, the downstairs, the windows. Everything looked normal. No signs of anyone inside. Feeling slightly embarrassed for letting my imagination spiral, I went back to my office and tried to focus again. Another hour passed. I was mentally exhausted, pushing through sheer willpower at this point. And then, a loud thump slammed against the wall behind me. Not a small noise, not a creak or a pop. A solid, heavy impact, like something had hit the wall directly behind my desk. My body jolted in my chair. I spun halfway around, heart racing, staring at the blank wall. There was nothing there. My bedroom was on the other side of that wall, so I tried to rationalize it as something shifting or falling over in there. But the sound had been too loud, too sharp, too intentional to just brush off. And after the window earlier, my nerves were already stretched thin. I stood up slowly and walked into the hallway. I opened the bedroom door and scanned the room carefully. Everything looked exactly the same as I'd left it. No fallen objects, no overturned furniture, no movement. I stepped inside, checking the corners, the floor, the closet area. Nothing was out of place. For a moment, I actually laughed under my breath, telling myself the lack of sleep must be getting to me. I went back to my office, but my concentration was gone. For the next 15 minutes, I couldn't stop thinking about that sound. It echoed in my head. The weight of it, the closeness of it, the way it felt too real to ignore. How could something that loud come from nothing? Finally, my frustration peaked. I spun my chair around again, staring directly at the wall behind me, replaying where the sound had come from. That's when something clicked. There was a closet there, a narrow storage closet built into the wall, the kind you forget exists because you barely ever use it. Mine was packed with old jackets, winter coats, and clothes I almost never touched. I hadn't even thought about it earlier. Curious and still not expecting anything, I stood up and walked toward it. Without much thought, I reached out and slid the closet door open. The door slid open, and my breath vanished from my lungs. For a split second, my brain couldn't even process what my eyes were seeing, like reality itself had glitched. A face was right there, not across the room, not in the shadows, not at a distance, right in front of me, only inches away. A man was standing inside my closet, wedged tightly behind layers of hanging jackets and coats. His face was partially hidden by fabric, but I could clearly see his eyes, wide, unblinking, locked directly onto mine. We were so close that if the clothes between us hadn't been there, he could have reached out and grabbed me instantly. My entire body locked up. A surge of pure panic flooded my chest, making it hard to breathe, hard to think, hard to even move. My heart slammed violently against my ribs as my brain screamed one word over and over: run. Before I could even react, the stranger exploded forward. The closet erupted in chaos. Hangers snapping, jackets tearing free, plastic rods clattering against the floor as he forced his way through the clothes toward me. I stumbled backward, barely keeping my footing as adrenaline ripped control from my body. The moment I turned and sprinted into the hallway, I heard him crash fully out of the closet behind me. Then I heard his voice. He called my name. Hearing my own name coming from a stranger's mouth sent a violent chill through my spine. It wasn't shouted. It was said in a rough, unsettling tone, almost familiar, like he had practiced it. I didn't recognize the voice, but he knew who I was. That realization hit harder than the fear itself. I bolted down the stairs, nearly slipping on the steps as my legs moved faster than my brain could keep up. My lungs burned. My hands shook so badly I could barely grab the door handle. I burst out of the house and into the cold night air. Behind me, I could still hear movement inside, but strangely, the man didn't chase me full speed. Instead, he kept shouting after me, trying to get me to stop, his voice echoing through the quiet street. I didn't slow down. I sprinted toward the nearest neighbor's house on the corner, pounding on their door with everything I had left in me. My fists slammed against the wood again and again until the porch light snapped on and the door opened. The moment someone appeared, I nearly collapsed into them, breathless and shaking, barely able to explain that someone had been inside my house. They called the police immediately. When officers arrived and searched my house, the man was already gone. There were no clear signs of where he exited, no broken doors, no obvious trail. The only suspicious detail was that same downstairs window, slightly disturbed but not obviously forced. It looked like he had simply disappeared. And that's when the reality of what almost happened truly set in. He had entered through that window earlier in the night, which meant that while I was upstairs working, while I was drinking coffee, while I was sitting with my back turned to the wall, he had been inside my house for over an hour, standing somewhere behind me, watching me, listening, waiting. Even worse, he knew my name. That meant this wasn't random. This wasn't some drunk trespasser or confused intruder. This was planned. Someone had targeted me. Someone had studied me enough to know exactly who lived there when I'd likely be alone, and how to move through my house silently. The thought still makes my stomach twist. If I hadn't stayed up working that night, if I had gone to bed like usual, I don't think I would be here right now. The idea of waking up with that man standing over my bed is something my mind refuses to fully imagine. I changed my locks the next morning, installed security cameras, stopped staying home alone late at night for a long time, but even now, years later, every time I open a closet door in the dark, I still half expect to see someone standing there, waiting for me.